below what we would know as hell or Hades, but the angels that are there, they are reserved unto judgment. And look at verse 5. And it says, and spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the eighth person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly. In verse 6, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes. Again, the correlation in the relationship of Sodom and Gomorrah and this whole episode. So what we see here is we see fallen angels that are caught in the flood, and they are condemned to Tartarus. But what of the Nephilim? Because what happened again, we have fallen angels plus mortal women, and we take the sum of that and we get Nephilim, or their children who were giants. And if you read a lot of literature that is out of the mainstream somewhat, you find a lot of references to giants and the remains of giants that have been found in history that the evolutionist and the, quote, scientific community, unquote, does not want to talk about because it slaps evolution right in the face. Pliny reported years ago, back during his time, that they discovered in a cave in Greece a human skeleton 130 feet tall. There have been reports of human skeletons found 30, 40, 50 feet long. And these were giants that may well have been skeletons of the Nephilim. But what happened to the Nephilim when they died? The Nephilim were a different breed, because here we have fallen angels, and those that were caught in the flood and died, they, of course, went to Tartarus. And we've already determined that on their death with the flood. Of course, mortal women who died during the flood went to Hades, or hell, as the Bible tells us. What of the spirit of the Nephilim? Well, this is a little bit of conjecture, but there was no place for the Nephilim, no place found for their spirits to go. So the Nephilim, we believe, became what are known today as demons. And how much this answers for us, how many questions of the paranormal, all of the ghost stories, all of the stories of disembodied spirits, all of those instances of ghost devils and all those things that can't be explained. How about that when you look at it in light of this, in light of the fact that we have a whole race of beings, the old ones, if you would, those that were born of fallen angels and mortal women, and you have a whole race of these beings that all of a sudden become disembodied spirits. Because you think about it, a fallen angel, an angel can embody at any time, and as an animal, or as a human being, or a clone of a human being, however how you want to say that. But a fallen angel can embody. Why are demons always looking for bodies to possess? Because remember the story of when Jesus cast the demons out of the man, and he cast the demons into the herd of swine. The demons said, they begged him, don't cast us out into the air, just cast us into those swine over there. The demons are always looking for a body to possess, whereas fallen angels can embody in any form that they like. So what we have here is a distinct difference between a fallen angel and a demon. So they're not alike, so therefore the spirits of the Nephilim, which had no place to go at the time of the flood, became disembodied spirits, and that is where we end up looking at the story of ghosts and of demons all throughout history. And speaking of history, as we erase the board here one more time, speaking of history, this whole concept matches up completely with the legends in ancient history of the Titans, for instance, in Greece. The stories of Zeus. Zeus came down, impregnated a young virgin, and he had Perseus was his son. There were also stories of goddesses coming down and getting pregnant by mortal men. And so so we see here in the stories of mythology, the whole idea of the Titans in Greece may well have been based on the Nephilim and the concept of what happened in the book of Genesis. Also, in all ancient civilizations, just as there are flood legends, there are legends of gods and goddesses coming down to earth and being impregnated by mortals and impregnating mortals and coming up and engendering a whole different race of individuals, of different beings than human or angel, but the hybrid of angel and human. So we see there that, that now we've established the fact that the Bible backs up what we're talking about over here in Genesis, and that legends and mythology backs up what we're talking about in Genesis. And so we can pretty much be fairly comfortable with asserting that Genesis chapter 6 and the days of Noah were not completely about just sin and violence in the earth. As a matter of fact, if we look over here in verse 9 of Genesis chapter 6, and these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations. Noah was spared from the flood specifically because there were no Nephilim in his genealogy. Now, why would Satan do this? Why in the world would Satan use this as a tactic to come in and destroy mankind and just incur the wrath of God? Why would Satan do that? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense until you go back in the book of Genesis to Genesis chapter 3 and verse 15. In Genesis 3:15, we see the account of the fall of man. In Genesis chapter 3, we see the account of the fall of man and God's judgment upon man and upon Satan because of the fall of man. And Genesis 3:15 specifically is the first promise of a Redeemer. The first time that we see that mankind will need a Redeemer to get back into favor with God. Genesis 3:15 says, "And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed, and it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel." Now this is a very interesting verse for many reasons. First of all, it is the first promise of a Redeemer here in the book, all the way back in the book of Genesis. But it talks about enmity between the seed of the serpent and then the seed of the woman. Now this seed of the woman was a very mysterious thing for many, many years, because the Jewish rabbis would look at this and say, how can this be? How can this be? We look in the Old Testament scriptures and we start looking at the genealogies, and we see that Adam begot Seth, and Seth begot Enos, and so forth and so on, and it came down Methuselah, Lamech, Noah, and we see always the male line is spoken of through other male members of the line, never the female. Also, we find that when the Bible speaks of the seed of an individual, it is always the seed of the male. The most prolific example in the Old Testament is the seed of Abraham. And the seed of Abraham is, of course, are the seed that received the promises of God through Isaac. But Abraham and his seed over and over and over again. But here in Genesis 3:15 we have this enigma, the seed of the woman. And the rabbis for years questioned this and said, well, how can there be a seed of the woman? Because the woman does not bear the seed. The man bears the seed, not the woman. But then, in Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14, the answer comes to light very plainly and very clearly. And I'm not going to turn to it. But Isaiah 7:14 tells us, "Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel," which is being interpreted, God with us. The only way the seed of the woman can